Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to talk about the hybrids of old and how the narcissist becomes their own hybrid. So let's jump in. So I know somebody out there, you know who I'm talking to, has been stealing my material and making money with it. And I'm supposed to get a check for the whole amount. So I would like for you to give it to me so I don't have to sue you for it. Thank you. You don't ever get validation from them. And you start to get in this mode like you were when you were a child, where you're pleasing them all the time. And the more you please a narcissist, the more they hate you. The more you don't like them, the more they will try to win you over. And that's why it's hard to get rid of them. But this is all built into the system of the narcissist. What they would call in psychology, and this is for entertainment purposes only, but in psychology they would say, oh, that's just instincts or fight or flight or whatever. But it's really not. You have spiritual orchestration that's in control of that avatar when it wants to. And it gets them addicted as well. They get addicted to the push and the pull, needing dopamine hits, and dealing with cortisol, which would bring on depression. Serotonin is another thing that brings joy. Well, they don't feel joy, but it gives them a high. And then adrenaline from putting fear into people or duping them, getting away with it. It's kind of like, and then they like the worship. And worship is admiration, adoration, adorning, and people pleasing them, being their servant, being in servitude towards them. So they eventually get you addicted to them. And they're addicted as well. They're very codependent. If you see a narcissist alone, then they're going to be on their phone until they find another human to stand beside them. Or they're going to be on a computer on FaceTime or something. They got to be always busy, because if they're not busy, they'll be thinking about how crappy they are and that they're all alone, and they can never be alone. It's almost like they call it abandonment issues, but I don't know. It is kind of built out of abandonment issues. What I think to some degree happens, different things. The abandonment issue, I think, comes out of fear, that they start to believe fears that maybe there could be. When you're a child, you're always going to have demonic or dark energy trying to attach to you. When you're a child, you're going to be most vulnerable because you're going to be new to things, and your brain and your mind and your emotions and stuff are all trying to find their way. They're developing. So you're going to be most susceptible that way because you haven't really established them. And when you haven't really established them, that's when the negative energy, or you can call it a demon or spirits, is going to want to connect with an individual. Because if they can connect with an individual while they're still developing, it's almost like a package that got sent to your house, but it got diverted. They're like the person that retrieved a package that was coming to you. And the package is like the narcissist, the child. Well, they turn them upside down and they start to get into their emotional field early on, but they're going to be influencing them from the outside. So if you're a child that may have, in some sorts of way, are a negative child or dealing with oppression from negative or narcissistic parents, and you are maybe weak in the spirit or like more of those types of behaviors, negative behaviors, then it's going to be easier for the child to be attached to dark energy. So an entity is going to hover around that energy level, and they can tell, they attach. So I believe that when you start getting on that vibration of 199 or less, demons could see that from far away that aren't indwelt in somebody, because they see in the spirit realm. We see in the 3D. And, we have the ability to see, in certain cases, in certain instances, spiritual stuff in the physical realm when God allows it to be known to us. I have. So what happens when you get on a low vibration like that? There's demons out here that aren't embodying people. It's almost like if you were to make it dark, like nighttime, you would see all the light, right, that's on. So if you were to imagine if people had different auras to them and you were to make it dark or dusk out, some people would have high shining bright lights, I would imagine. And then some would be on different levels of lighting. That would probably tell to some degree what kind of issues each individual is dealing with from afar if there was a demon out here looking. But also, they can probably tell by the vibration. Just like how if there's an earthquake, the water, you're going to see it ripple out. Just like that, energetically out here, they're going to be able to feel those vibrations. They're going to attach to individuals that have low vibrations, because it's telling you that they either are more in tune to dark energy and more susceptible because they may enjoy that vibration more, feel more comfortable with that vibration, or their parents may make them feel that they need to live at that vibration. They may be being taught and groomed to live at that vibration forcibly. They may just be really depressed and feel kind of hopeless. So there's different things that would probably lead an entity to a young child. They're going to attach to a young child before they're going to get an adult. Because if they can get in a child and get twisted in their head and in their emotional field, if they can control it early enough, by the time that child starts to begin to grow, if they get them, say, at 5, 6, 7, I don't know, somewhere young, that's allowed according to the rules of God. We don't know when that is, but they do happen. A lot of them, they start young. It seems like this stuff starts to take place at a young age. Well, they will attach to them, because if they can connect to them as a narcissist and make them into a narcissist, that's when they can be susceptible to become a narcissist. People don't become narcissists after a certain age level because they've emotionally used the emotional fields and kept those areas open from closing up, from deadening, which allows them to feel all the emotions of the 9 fruits of spirit, or at least to some degree. They haven't completely shut them down, but when you get a demonic attachment at a young age, then it will convince them or have influence on them to steer them certain ways, which will get them to live in that fight or flight if they could, which will cause them to be shut down. Now, this is theory, but everything in psychology is theory, most of it at least. This is how I think it works. They will attach to them based on their energetic field and their aura. They're susceptible. You're going to go to the most susceptible individual. It's just like a lion's going to try to get the one who runs the slowest is the one that gets eaten. You just got to be faster than the slowest deer or whatever, if a lion's chasing a group of deer. Well, in the narcissist situation, or the child that becomes the narcissist, I would imagine it would be the same thing. You're going to go to the one that's most busted up, or the one that chooses to be most busted up. It's almost like me and someone who becomes a narcissist could have gone through the same amount of trauma and pain and had the same parents, been treated the same. Sometimes the empath, a lot of times, is treated worse. There's no proof that a narcissist is treated any different. So that's why I bring in the fact that either they may have been more susceptible to liking those types of energy than you did if you became an empath and they didn't. But I do believe we are predestined. I mean, it talks about this in the Bible, and I believe before we landed in our mother's womb, we were in an innate spirit for whatever reason. However, God created us, gave us some sort of free will before we entered our mother's womb. That's my point. And that's what makes you predestined. You are predestined before you're put in your mother's womb. It was already done. You're just walking it out, although you don't know your predestination, but God does. And so if he does, he knows everything. So if he does, that means to some degree, you're going to walk a certain path, and he knows it already. So it's not something to really focus on, but at the end of the day, when you're trying to define this and how is it right or how is it wrong, that's when I come up with the predestination situation, because that's what it really does boil down to when you get into what's right and what's wrong, what's fair and what's not, because it is fair. Because it's just like God gives us the ability to choose who we want to be, what we want to do, and how we want to do it. Outside of the law, or the spiritual law, or the physical 3D law that we have built, he's not going to push any extra boundaries on you, because God is who he is, and he wants us to have the ability to choose. Now, the enemy, Satan, is the one that chooses and bullies you into doing what he wants, as much as he can, pressuring you, applying pressure. But the Lord doesn't. So this is how it would work. And from there, it starts to train them up a certain way, almost to the point to where they're still learning how to function in their emotions and how to think in their mind and their heart and how to treat people or how to be treated. Well, because they get caught up so young, under the age of 10, they're starting to get molded as everything is coming together. into fruition for who they are to become, right? Because what is it, when you're like 14, 15, guys start getting hair grow under their armpits or whatever, and they're going through puberty. And the negative energy attachment is going to be concerned about controlling the mind, the will, the emotions, and shutting down the love centers, the intuition, and the inside voice, your innate spirit, things like that, putting them to death. And this is just come to me, man. This is what people would say is download. This is really good. I was going to talk about covert narcissists, and it turned into this. So this is what the Lord wants me to talk about. And this is how it would work. So what happens is it builds inside that little child as it's growing. It is training them up to think and operate and require being treated a certain way and demanding it, making them very stiff-necked, hard-headed, and bullies. And while it's doing that, the dark energy, it's also causing them to just focus on these areas, as if the child would start to think maybe that's the only way you could think as an individual. It gets convinced to only think this way. Fixed. That's what we always say. At some point in time, if you don't use it, you lose it. So if you could picture, it's like your vessels, your veins and arteries and these sorts of things that would run these centers in the brain. Let's hypothetically use a river or streams, right? You have a bunch of little veins sometimes where the stream will or river will break off, and it will be in several different areas, go in several different directions, some bigger and some smaller. Well, if those areas that feed the brain are the areas that feed the frontal lobes, and where you have the areas of understanding, the love centers, where you get the 9 fruits of the spirit. Well, if they can shut those little streams and creeks down where it starts to bifurcate, then if it can dry them up, meaning get the narcissist child or the child focused on, the hatred or demanding, the bullying, the control, the power, and build them up that way, then this stream is going to get diverted over here, because it's almost like when you need blood flow, it comes. It's like when you need to digest food, you just ate a meal, all the blood runs down to your stomach and you get tired because it's not up here in your brain like it normally would be. A heavy meal, right? It's got to digest now, which makes you sleepy. Well, if you're focused on this area is going to start to dry up, and it's going to force more blood this way. Now, this is all hypothetical, but this is how I think it works. And these little streams over here eventually get forgotten about, and they close up. When those streams close up, they shut down, and it's like it turns into dirt, and then it dries up and it gets hard. And then if you wanted to push water through there, you'd have an embankment. You can't. It's dead, basically. So now you're forced to only go this way. And that way, it's like you get on the anatomical left is going to be more logical and no real love and emotions, A lot of the emotional, the things that make us humanity, the creativity is going to be a little bit more on the right, anatomical right. And with that, they are all connected in some way to your innate spirit. So I think what happens is wherever your innate spirit is housed, it has to line up. And my ear's ringing, so that means something. But your innate spirit lines up. It's connected to the 9 fruits of the spirit. It has to be. And your inside voice, your intuition. So when one of those goes, like that stream dries up, it takes all of it out. They're all tethered. Because this because the narcissist has none of those. So when they say they turned their true self in, their innate spirit, they say their true self or their false self, they sacrificed it. This is how it would, in my opinion, scientifically, this is how it was sacrificed. Because on PETs and MRIs, a lot of narcissists, most of them, they're going to have it to where certain sectors of the brain, like in the frontal lobes, are shut off. They don't light up the same as the rest of humanity. That's why I talk on the Lord. He didn't like hybrids in Genesis 6, which is basically a copulation of a fallen angel mating with a human woman. Or they were able to interject their seeds maybe into even the animals, because it sounds like all flesh on the earth was corrupted. And I do believe that's why you see all these animals back in Antiquity with human heads and things.
It talked about the lion men of Moab. They had lion heads and human bodies. King David fought. There's an instance in Kings. These giants were not just genetically the same as us. They were different. And they weren't just two humans that made it. I mean, we have 3 parietal plates. They have 2. They have elongated skulls. We do not. They had 6 fingers, 6 toes. They had double rows of teeth. And a lot of times they had elongated necks, because the fallen angels that mated with the human women, maybe they didn't copulate as in have intercourse with the animal, but let's say that they had the ability to take genetic material and to energetically put that material into, just like genetically manipulating, right? That's possible, very much so. Because all of our technology we're looking for is fallen angel technology, and it's from ancient of times. I told y'all I'm going to go back to the ancient of things, because we have been purposely or misunderstood or not taught what really happened in history. And I'm bringing some of that back because I've studied a lot of these things. So this is on the board for today. But God talked about how when he made things, he said, seed after its own kind, the tree, the seed after its own kind, this after its own kind, this, that after its own kind. He said it so many times in Genesis. He was trying to make a point. When he ordained it that way, that's how it was supposed to be. He doesn't repeat himself like that for no reason. He repeated himself like that because he knew the fallen angels were going to come and copulate. Now, they did have the ability to shapeshift. They talk a lot about this in Antiquity, that they had the ability to, if they could, an angel could turn into a human. They're not like a demon where they're just this invisible body that has to inhabit a human. Like, for instance, this damned soul that can't go to hell and it can't go to heaven. It's forced to roam the earth until it finds another body, because it was once housed in a body. So it needs a body to operate fully. That's how demons became about. They were the disembodied spirits of the giants, dirty spirits. And they could be from chimera mixed with fallen angel, half animal. And you find those, and they could be dirty spirits in people as well, or in animals. But they could have had the ability also to shapeshift into each and every animal and copulate with them as well, because there's speculation there. And I know it sounds disgusting, but it has to be talked about, because there's a lot of disgusting things that happened on this earth. When we're talking about how things in the biblical narrative occurred, we have to be adult enough and open our minds and our hearts enough, and our spirit, to at least listen to how it possibly and probably happened. And that's why mythology to the occult, the esoteric and the exoteric, remember? So to the exoteric would be what they taught us. They taught us that mythology was just a hoax and they made it all up. But really what it really is telling, in my humble opinion, is the true history of what really went on during the Genesis 6 era, when the fallen angels came and mated with human women. They were fallen angels because they were called sons of God. So when it says the sons of God went into the daughters of men and created men of renown, men of old, the men of basically ancient of times that were looked at as demigods. That's where you get gods from. In some cases where people will talk about these gods and they look like it could have been a bird man or a dog man or who knows. Well, picture it like they were genetically manipulating in the olden days. And that stuff they call mythology was actually pre-Noah's Ark flood reality. You see? They don't want you to know that there's a God, an Almighty. So because of that, they're going to tell you you're on a globe heliocentric model Earth instead of a geocentric, a flat Earth. Because if you believe the geocentric, you're going to have to know that there's some sort of firmament up there, some sort of glass molten dome, and there's water above it, and that's why the sky is blue. What God talked about is they were an abomination because they had copulated and created a mixture of a being that God didn't ordain. And if there were ever dinosaurs or dragons, did you know dinosaurs were called dragons until the 1880s in the encyclopedias and things? It was changed to dinosaurs. And they start to do this. They're even doing it with the biblical translations. They change words here and there to where down the road, it's insidious. It's slowly. So that you slowly accept it. A little bit of leaven spoils the whole lump. And they take a little bit of power out of the Bible here and there and add to it and take away from it. And then before you know it, you're trying to deal with casting out some sort of demon or something. You can't, because it doesn't have any power. It doesn't hold the sword that's supposed to be the sword. Well, it's kind of like a rubber sword now. But the problem with the narcissist that makes it hard for them to be delivered is if you sacrifice your true self or your false self, you become a hybrid. You created your own hybrid by shutting those parcels down. So my point is how do you turn them back on when you shut the love centers down? Because it makes you reprobate. It makes you a hybrid. You're not a human, really. That's why people don't even believe in God. They're going to be like, they'll tell you that narcissist doesn't even seem human. They're like robotic. They are, because they're logical only. But that's why they can set you up in all these crazy predicaments later on down the road, because they're always playing chess. And they don't care because they're heartless. When you don't feel love, man, you don't even feel it. They fake it. That's why they need to wear the 9 fruits of the Spirit, because they can't produce them. So for them to get a good source of supply, they need to steal some good energy that has the 9 fruits of the Spirit so they can fake it real good by wearing somebody else's energy, by jumping in somebody else's. It's like a skinwalker that jumps into you. You take your energy field that looks like your body, right? Just light up a body of energy. Well, they take that whole body of energy from that looks like a body, but it's just an aura. And then they replace it with their aura. That's why you look like the narcissist, because you're wearing their energy. And for a long time, when they steal your fuel, they're stealing your identity. They're stealing your mannerisms, the way your gifts, you see. And they imitate you. Now, you may not notice how they imitate you, but that's what they are doing. And that's what they're teaching themselves to do. Because they want to walk in your energetic field as long as they can so that they can produce with it. They can get sources of supply, good ones, higher end ones, because they can fake it better. They can maybe pull off some weird heist better because they can fake the 9 fruits of the Spirit better. But they never feel love, joy, peace, goodness, gentleness, because that's all connected to your true self, and that was sacrificed. And in that vacuum, that's when the demons start to fill them up. Because in a vacuum, something's always going to fill the vacuum. And in the case of humanity and demonic energy, it's always going to be filled with something negative, because there's only 2 sides to this coin, if you believe in, the biblical narrative. But they don't want you to believe in a God or a Satan. That's why they cover up the giants and the fallen angel situation and that whole Genesis 6 era. In fact, you learned that whole Genesis 6 era when you're a little kid, and all they tell you is sweet little Noah was on the ark with all the animals, and there was a giraffe hanging his head out the window, and they were out there, and they'll sing some song, 40 days and 40 nights with a rainbow. And that right there is for them to indoctrinate you so that when you get older, you just think sweet little Noah in your head when it comes up. But really, that wasn't the case, or there was a lot of sin on the earth. But that's not the case at all. It was all sinful, but it was like an abomination. It was like you might have some hybrid dinosaur, if they ever existed, pop out of the woods and chew you up. Or some lizard man, or some kind of mermaid or merman. All that stuff probably existed during that Genesis 6 era. And they had high-end technology, because fallen angels took high-end technology with them when they left. I mean, they still had the ideas to build it, to make it. Where do you think computers and stuff came from? That's what we're always digging up. That's what we're always having wars over. That's what Black Ops is for. It's to find that old stuff from antiquity. It's not, I mean, it is, but a lot of the technology is not stuff we're creating because we're thinking it up now. It's stuff that was created and thought up from the fallen angels from the, maybe 800 years or so that they were on the earth running it. And their sons and daughters were like gods because they were giants and they didn't look like us. And that's why people, like in certain areas of the world, will stretch their necks out, because they had elongated necks, because they were all seraphim angels, serpent-headed angels, angelic hosts. And they say they had lizard eyes, reptilian eyes. That's why they call them reptilian shapeshifters. You see people shapeshift sometimes into a reptile, because all of the fallen angels that came, it was a set. It was like a platoon that came down, like 200. They landed on Mount Hermon, or Hermon, I think it's called, in Israel. And that's where they agreed to make a pact that they were going to take all of the human women that they chose to mate with. But they were the rest of the world, I do believe, and they weren't of the group of, well, it was only 8 people left that weren't corrupted. And that's why God had to send the animals to Noah, because all of the rest of the animals, I'm figuring, were all corrupted already, because it said all flesh except for whatever was on that boat. So then some people speculate that one of those women had been impregnated and maybe took a Nephilim spirit in the womb over the flood, because they came back, they were much smaller. But when you hear about all these gods like Kronos and all these Achilles and Gilgamesh and Hercules, they were probably the Nephilim of old, y'all. And they were cutting and vitrifying and cutting with lasers. And all of that stuff got destroyed in the flood. That's why you'll see pyramids on high mountains. And how did they do it? Or these big stones that are 500 tons. And you know they had to have quarried them from 500 miles away. How did they do it? And all these weird things. Megaliths, they're called, monoliths. They're called Cyclopean architecture because one-eyed giant is what that means. And that's in our regular history. It wasn't ancient aliens. Yeah, it was ancient aliens, but they were fallen angels. And that's why that occurred. And there's speculation on how they came back, because no other fallen angel would ever try to do that again, because God tortured them so bad and locked them up in the dungeons of the underneath the earth, the abyss. And they were in so much pain and horror on a continual basis until their time of damnation, permanent damnation or destruction, when we are all judged in the end, that no other fallen angel, when they looked upon them, would ever try to do that again. And a lot of that technology that we have today is just stuff that is from antiquity. Some people call it antiquitech and things like that. And a lot of that stuff that we have was not created by us, but it was from that era that we dig up. Black Ops goes down there and fights a small war and tries to retrieve it when they find out they found something under the ground 600 feet deep or something. Who knows? But these are things that create wars that they make a false backdrop to. We call smoke and mirrors sometimes. We think that the war's over oil, and it has nothing to do with that. It's because they found some new laser type equipment, but they were somehow levitating things. Some would say the harmonics of the giants had such big nostrils and stuff because they were like some of them were 36, 40 feet tall, and even taller, some of them. During that era, the pre-flood era, they were the tallest. The post-flood era, after that, when they came back, speculation of how they came back, was it through witchcraft? Because there is some sort of stuff that alludes to that. Somebody was pregnant with a Nephilim in their body, one of the women, already before the flood started. Maybe they cheated on their husband or something and didn't tell them. And then you have another incursion, which didn't happen but it has got to be thrown out there, of fallen angels. They didn't do that. But you got to throw it out there. Or the things of the water, the Nephilim of the water, because like a mermaid or a merman or something, they didn't, I'm assuming they didn't kill everything in the water. God might have left an opening there for some sort of procreation, maybe, I don't know. Or if they were some that were able to hide in the inner earth somehow while it was being flooded, like an air chamber section. That I guess is a possibility. There's a lot of caves and things, but then there's also the King of Og story where he hung on to Noah's Ark ship, which is kind of odd, but it's a possibility because it does allude to King Og being the one that made it almost through as one of the original, like talking about from pre-flood. And there is an apocryphal book where it talks about that, so I don't know. But nevertheless, I guess I'll stop here. This will be maybe part 1 and part 2 to this, because I can go for days on this. And this is why I break down narcissism the way I do, because I understand this type of stuff and conspiratorial stuff, because conspiratorial stuff in a lot of ways is all true, y'all. So thank you for watching. Give me a like, subscription, and a thumbs up. Love y'all. Till next time. Sold you up. Peace be out.